Hi there, Laura Donnelly from Dancing with Ease, Body Brain Balance, and I'm here today with another issue of the healing path. And the healing path is like one of my favorite things. So I think we're all healing from different things at different times throughout our lives. And this series of conversations is conversations I have with friends and colleagues who are working in different areas of healing. There are so many modalities and ways of doing healing. And the goal with this is to present a wide array of healing modalities so that the one that resonates really deeply with you, I would recommend that's the path you step onto first and see what happens. Many of these go together: journaling, breathing, exercise. It's not that important how you start, it's important that you start. And one of the things that brings the guests to me and me to the guests that I talk to and the people I know in this field is the idea that all healing starts with self-healing. And what I mean is the decision that we are going to let ourselves heal. And whether we use medical means, extreme medical means, natural means, homeopathic, it's this openness to change that opens a door, and then the healing path unfolds. So today, my guest is Joyce Elder, and she is going to talk to you about some really awesome stuff having to do with healing throughout conflict. I think that's how she said. She'll tell you more. She'll tell it to you really right. Hang on one second and I'll bring her on the screen.
Hello.
Hi, Joyce. It's so good to see you.
You too.
I'm so happy we met and in virtual person. And that's one of the things I really like about technologies. It allows us to connect with people all over the world with ideas from every corner of the earth so that we can choose the healing path that really works for us. So tell us, I guess, a little bit about you, about your topic for today, and we'll just go from there.
All right. Well, I got started a little late in life. My story originally started when I was a teenager. And one day I found myself in a room that had no running water. And so it had no toilet, it had no shower. And when you're a teen, these are kind of big deals, right? And I also had no ability to brush my teeth. This was just an entirely traumatic situation to be in. But the reason that I was in it, it would have seemed like it was kind of cool, right? If it had been like more like camping in a small space, out in the outdoors, able to do what we wanted. But I was actually in a laminar flow unit. I had been diagnosed a year before with aplastic anemia, which is a rare bone marrow failure syndrome. And then I also, later than that, was subsequently diagnosed with an even more rare bone marrow failure syndrome. So now I was dealing with two. But the biggest change that happened with the second bone marrow failure syndrome was that I went from having the bone marrow transplant being the treatment of choice for the aplastic anemia to it being the only treatment for the PNH. And so I eventually found my way into the laminar flow unit, which is an isolation unit. It's a positive flow. So they're bringing in filtered air and then it's moving it out the door. People are not allowed to come in except for one nurse, and that's when she is dressed from head literally to toe, covered up in 2 to 3 layers of masks, gloves, booties, gowns, and so have you. So it was quite the time to be to be growing up. But it was one of the coolest things about it was that it actually is what led me down this path, it was one of the things that really pivoted my life. And it's really been instrumental in being able to help others heal theirs through crises. And then it also gave me some of the tools that I need to, when I was just maybe 7 years ago, I was, when I was a association manager. I don't know why that was hard to get out, but when I was an association manager, I was in the office one day and a person stormed the front desk and made incredible threats. We knew that he carried firearms. We knew that he carried knives, and we knew he was trained in hand-to-hand combat. So with him standing in the doorway, there was no chance to escape. There was no chance to hide. There was no chance to really do anything except for being able to listen. And that's when I really decided, okay, a lot of people really don't know how to show their best selves and really bring out the best when it really is critical in a conflict, any more than they did when in a crisis. So that's really how I got started in conflict and crisis strategy. I had my own crises to deal with, having dealt with a bone marrow transplant and all of the incredible complications that happened during that process. And I've also dealt with some pretty high stakes conflicts as well. And I've done a lot of mediating, and that has also helped get that training up and running.
Well, I think when you were talking about the guy storming yeah, actually both cases, it's very hard not to react, and reaction is going to be the thing that escalates the conflict, whether it's within us or between us and somebody else. And so I'm really interested to hear more about your process in terms of conflict resolution or mediation, and how those. I would imagine after a lifetime, you had a lot of tools in your toolbox, but the presence of mind to actually open the toolbox and pick up the tool you need in the middle of a crisis or a strong conflict, that's challenging.
Yeah.
So how did you, I guess, I don't know, how did you gather the tools, or how did you know, like in the situation where the guy was storming the desk, how did you know what to do? Was it instinctive? Was it logical? Was it a combination of logic and instinct?
It actually, I had no training in it. I did not know that I had any ability to resolve a hostage incident whatsoever. But I knew that we had lives at stake, and I couldn't understand why I would just want to sit there and say, well, this is it. Bye-bye. I needed to make a different decision. And that's really where a lot of our ability to respond instead of react to a conflict or a crisis comes into play, is with a decision. You mentioned that at the beginning of the podcast. And there is a difference in, we think that we know what a decision is, but do we really? There is, one of the things that I have learned is that originally when we start to make a decision, we think, yep, I'm going to do that. But is that really, when you're dealing with a serious life or death situation, that's not going to cut it. You really have to cut off from all other possibility. Your focus is strictly on that, and you're not going to take anything else for an answer. I'm just not going to take no. So when I had the transplant, that was one level of a decision, but it was an easy decision. Strange to say, but it was easy because of the fact that there was one choice, right? I had the choice between, well, I can fight to live, or I can just give up. And in a way, it was the same thing for the hostage incident. I can fight for my, give it all that I have to live, or I can give up. And that's one level of a decision.
Seems like,
I think I've lost you.
yeah, we froze a minute.
Okay, there you are.
Yeah, let's try again. So in the hostage situation, what was the same there?
The thing that was the same for the hostage incident was, excuse me, that again, it was a case of I had a binary option, right? I could really give all that I had towards survival, or I could just freeze, give up, and let things happen. But the difference that I discovered is that there's an even higher level of a decision. When I started my business, that was an even greater decision to have to make. And the reason for that is that now it wasn't just a life or death type of thing, but now it was sort of a case of, now I'm going into a case where I'm comfortable right now, and I'm going to put myself through a more difficult, challenging, I'm taking myself out of my comfort zone, putting myself in the dark where I don't know what I'm going to encounter. I don't know if I have all the tools, but I know it's going to be challenging. And why am I doing all of this again? So that's an even higher level of decision to be able to make. And so in some ways, it's easier to make a decision and stick with it when you're dealing with a conflict or crisis, when the stakes are high. And so with the...
I can see that. I mean, it's either this or that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
Nope, I've lost.
Jump out of the burning car or stay in the burning car.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's doing. It's not giving me any message about this, but we'll hope it comes together here. Come on, technology. So you were talking about listening also as an important feature in the hostage confrontation situation.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the very first healing path conversations I had was about listening. Mm-hmm. And the real gift that listening to another person gives that person, just listening. Mm-hmm. And I think that's also the hardest thing, like in the middle of conflict. Like I can even just think, when I have an argument with my husband, we are both not listening usually, and we are both talking. And sometimes if one or the other person is quiet, they still aren't listening. They are thinking, this person has told me this a million times. They don't understand. They're never going to understand. And it's just that that mental chatter actually prevents listening. So throughout a conflict, you were talking to right before we started, you were talking about that sometimes a crisis happens and people, they just try and put everything on the back burner and deal with the crisis. And then they think that they'll start their healing after the crisis is resolved. And I think that's because they imagine that healing means they can't also be present and deal with the crisis. But it sounds to me like in that hostage situation, you had to be very present. And in order to resolve the situation without a loss of life, because it sounds like the person was pretty upset when they arrived there, that even just de-escalating a situation is healing. Mm-hmm. At some level. I think people think, well, until I have this, I had cut myself, and until it's completely healed and I can't see the scar at all, it's not healing. But actually, it's healing in little micro steps, all along the trajectory of what's happening.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think, unfortunately, that a conflict is a signal that healing needs to happen.
Well, it's actually an opportunity for it to happen, not just for that one incident, but for many other things. One of the things when you've had a number of podcasts where people have mentioned that listening is the key. And here I am doing it again. And I hope people keep bringing that message up because it is absolutely so key. And just like there are different ways and different hierarchies for decisions, there is also a different hierarchy in terms of listening. And there are different ways and different intensities of it. One of the things about listening is that we really have to start by listening with ourselves. When I started, when I just released a new course about conflict over the course of the holidays. And one of the first things that I presented on was the topic of listening to yourself. Start by writing out and brainstorming all these ideas and thoughts and beliefs that you have about conflict. Because until we do that, we don't actually know where we are. And if we don't know where we are, then we can't get where we want to go because we don't have a map. We have to actually do that. And there's also something to be said for listening first to the other person as well. Because if we don't do that, and I've heard a lot of people object as soon as I say that, they're like, yeah, but I have to be heard too. Why do I have to be the one to listen first? It should be them. And here's
Oh,
and it's possible I might have been that person once.
I bet you everybody who listens to this might have been that person once.
So, and here's the reason that this is important. When we take the time to listen to somebody else, we are able to meet them where they are at. And what's key about that is that if we're trying to share our perspective and we don't do that first, what basically is happening then is it's the equivalent of me trying to tell you to be here now without telling you my address that I'm at or giving you directions on how to get here. That's why we need to be able to listen first. Somebody has to start by being able to go find out where the other person is and then bring them to where you want them to be. That's the power of listening first.
So, question. There's, dear, how do I say this? Okay, well, there's just a thing that people started doing in the last 5 or 10 or 15 years. It's kind of hard to keep track of time. Of saying to somebody, I heard you say. Is that good? Is that a useful technique? Sometimes it kind of makes me think, well, because I go a little too fast. I'm like, well, of course that's what I said. But the other thing for me is just repeating what the person said is repeating the words. But if I don't add, and those words mean to me what, and that's what I heard, right? Not just what they said, but there's what I heard, which is the meaning I have associated to the words they said. And sometimes when I'm trying to listen my best, you know, that understanding piece is a stumbling block. And so that's an area for me that can create additional conflict in the middle of a conflict.
One of the things that I have heard of all of the mediation trainings that I have been through, some trainer always stands up and says that you have to tell them what they said back when you're the mediator. And each time I picture myself losing more hair because I'm just ready to rip it out. And I don't have the most hair to begin with. So here's the challenge that I have with it. I might have several. One of them is that if we just repeat back, that doesn't tell you that I actually listened to you. That doesn't tell you that I listened to understand versus it may be that I listened to reply. It depends on what I do with it next, right? If I just say, here's what I heard you say, then that doesn't get me anywhere. I'm like, you listened well in school, didn't you? That was rote memorization. And there's a difference between that's almost listening. And then there's also listening to reply, which is, here's what I said, here's what I heard you say, but here's what I believe instead. I heard you say that, but I'm not going to listen to you because I have something more important. And what I say has greater weight than what you said. And then there's also another strategy. Why am I losing my voice now? There's the other strategy is that you, instead of paraphrasing, mediation trainers can hate me all they want, but I do not advocate paraphrasing, where you use their exact same words. My strategy is I will build rapport in other ways and share, here's what I heard you say, and then I'll either ask another question about it or take it to a deeper level and say, and here's what I imagine that must feel like for you. It feels different, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
No, that's really helpful because I have just cringed at that.
I do not know where I think that I know that the reason that they advocate doing that is to build rapport. But you don't actually have to repeat verbatim what the other person does. And as a mediator, if I am doing that with one party while the other party is sitting there, am I building rapport with that person or am I breaking rapport with that person? Because I've got to kind of keep several. And if I am facilitating and there's a whole room full of people, I've got a lot of rapport building to do with every person at that table. And so paraphrasing is not necessarily our best strategy for doing that. In the end, I think that it actually is a setback more than something that brings us forward. There are better ways that we can show that we listened than to paraphrase, and there are better ways to show that we're building rapport.
That makes me take a deep breath. And at the same time, I think one of that this came into being as a way to prevent another problem, which is the problem of interruption, the problem of what else comes in there from interruption? Trying to fix the other person. But it's really, really interesting. So
it's a fascinating topic, right? Both in terms of the conflict and the crisis.
Yeah.
And especially in a conflict because you've got another person with you. And our tendency is that we don't like conflict because I think that if we were to look up conflict in a picture dictionary, most people would probably would probably imagine that it's two people toe to toe, face to face, nose to nose, going at it, trying to force the other person to their way of thinking. And my strategy is different when it comes to a conflict. I don't think that conflict resolution is actually solving a conflict between two people. I think that conflict resolution is actually solving a problem using the perspectives of both of those people. See, a conflict isn't really between two people. If you and I are having a disagreement, if we are both working on a project together, you think that it should be one way, I think it should be done another way, people tend to think, well, now we have a problem. No, we have an opportunity. We have the best opportunity because we've got two people, both with good heads on our shoulders, who are seeing things from different perspectives. And that actually makes it so that we can use both of those perspectives to, first of all, catch more of the errors before we actually make them. And if we put our heads together, instead of trying to compromise, instead of saying, well, I'll give you this if you do this. No, that usually ends up being a disaster because we didn't listen all the way. If we listen fully to each other and put our heads together, instead of compromising, what happens if we collaborate? What happens if we say, okay, I can see that you have a good head on your shoulder, and I really want to hear what your perspective is. And then you bring them over and say, now I heard you say this, and I want to add this to that. Now we've got two ideas. What happens if we put our head together and say, hey, you know what? We have an opportunity to come together today and create an even better solution than either one of us had individually. That is conflict resolution. That is collaboration. And that is what we have the opportunity to do during a conflict. When we have a conflict, people tend to think conflict is bad. Conflict is what led to the person inventing the remote control. He had a conflict. A conflict is when something bumps up against our ideas, beliefs, values, or identity, right? He didn't believe he should have to get up to turn the television on. He didn't believe he should have to get up to turn it down because the commercial was too loud. He didn't believe he should have to get up to change the channel when a commercial was on or when he wanted to watch something else. He had a conflict. And that conflict actually made it so that he could do something, he could give us a better solution. That's what a conflict is. It's an opportunity.
I think you said something really important in there also. It's a conflict of beliefs. Go through those things again, just a little bit more slowly, because I think that that's sometimes what gets people stuck on their side of the fence. Mm-hmm. They are attached to their belief or their something, but you had 4 things that were really great. And my brain is going, I'm not going to remember all those. But there I'm having an internal conflict, right? Because I want to remember those things. And I'm afraid that I can't. And there's the very thought of that. And I miss them.
So a conflict is, my definition of a conflict is when something bumps up against our identity, values, beliefs, or anything else, any of our other filters that we are looking at things through. And it's important to note that not one of those things is the other person. Now, their identities, values, and beliefs may be bumping up against yours. It might be a you got your chocolate on my peanut butter kind of thing. But look at how well that worked out with the Reese's cup, right?
Right. No, I think it's really great. I think that was really, I think this is all very interesting. And we touched on conflict around the holidays. This can be, I think in this time of COVID, that this can be, some people want to get together and other members of the family are afraid to get together. And this can create all levels of hurt and sadness and misunderstanding. And that's the other thing is I think that from listening to you is that a lot of conflict is misunderstanding the other person's point of view. Mm-hmm. And then I'm thinking about especially some friends I have, and and what happens to me also when I start a conversation from the place of feeling misunderstood, whether I'm misunderstood or not, whether, I don't really know whether the other person understands me or doesn't understand me. But if I feel like they don't, then I'm pushing up against one of those identity things that like an identity conflict, or and I'm like, I come out more forcefully than I'm meant to, because I had to overcome my initial trepidation of being misunderstood and my own story. I mean, this is the whole thing, is like somebody says something, they got this gigantic mountain of story behind them, right? Nobody understood me from the time I was 12 and blah blah blah, and it's like, really, let's just come right back here, just this moment. Maybe I'm not understanding me, you know maybe I don't understand what I need in this situation. So how on earth can I ask for it, um if that's the situation?
I think that's an important question, especially because some people will be trying to have a virtual celebration. And even if we actually do that, some people are thinking, well, that'll be better. And no, 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 no. Because what can happen with the virtual celebrations is that we're missing cues. You might be making gestures right now, but I can't see them. You might have seen this one, but you don't know what the other hand is doing. And you don't get the same feeling. You don't get the same feedback with a virtual. And so if anything, it's actually more important this year. And we also need to have more conversations, right? Every year we have people that are expected to make it to 3 different celebrations, right, in a day. And so it can be a challenge to, well, how do I have this conversation to say, no, we need to meet at this time so that I can be done by that time, so I can be there by this time, so that I can be done with that by this time and move on to this. How do we have that kind of a conversation? And that's just one of the biggest questions that we can come up with. And one of the best ways to do that comes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is listening. When we have a host or a hostess who is listening, who is trying to prepare for this thing, I mean, picture yourself just wanting to have, you've got the idea of, I've got to be ready with the food. I've got to be ready with the gifts. I've got to be ready with the entertainment. What games are we going to play? Who do I bring? Who do I want to introduce or fix up with this person? Because I can't just have somebody be alone. Why? Because I have to have all these things, because I see myself as the perfect host or hostess. It has to be perfect. And so in the midst of all of that, where are they? Are they overwhelmed at this point? Are they going to be able to listen to you if you try to have that conversation with them at that particular moment in time? My argument is probably not, because they are listening to their own mind. They are full. They don't have room to listen to more. So my strategy for that is, let's see what we can do to help them kind of do a brain dump and get to the point where they all of a sudden realize there's another person in the room. There's a person in this conversation, and it's you. And at that point, they're going to be more curious, and that is going to help them be in a position to listen to you better. And so that's one of the reasons, that's another one of the reasons that listening is so key in these types of conversations, is it's going to give people the room that they need to be able to empty whatever is in their mind. And it might even be that it's totally unrelated to the whole conversation that you are expecting to have.
But it's pressing on the conversation.
Yes.
It's
influencing it.
It's changing people's tone of voice. It's changing the amount of time they feel like they have to spend in conversation. And yeah, it's funny. Now I'm thinking of another conflict I had in my brain. It's funny. It's very funny. But you had mentioned that you have a course. How does the course work? Is it for one person to take to think about their piece of communication within a conflicting situation? Is it something that two people could take together if they're in the middle of a conflict and go through the worksheets and study guides together?
It actually could be either. That's a good question. It is designed to take a person through, even if you're anticipating a possible conflict. And there are 3 different stages that I am taking people through. One is setting the stage for it. So before something even happens, what can you do to prepare for that in order to create the best possible environment and be able to make things, give yourself the best opportunity? And then we're moving into, okay, now the conversation is starting, and now what can I do? What do I need to do in order to be best situated so that then in the 3rd stage or phase, I can sort of take the lead. And when I say take the lead, I don't mean run past everybody and win the race. This is not a win-lose type of situation the way that I imagine it. What I'm really aiming for is taking the lead in terms of being able to guide the conversation. So it might be an appropriate course for somebody who's saying, I know that this is going to get out of hand, and I want to be able to either change the topic, or I want to be able to introduce my perspective, and it's never been received well when I've tried it in the past. Or there are any, I'm answering the more common questions that are coming up during those holiday types of conversations.
That's great.
And it's a small course. It's a 50-minute. If you just listen to the videos, it comes out to about 50 minutes in total. But there are some worksheets and exercises and experiments to run as well.
Cool. You gave me some links to connect with you, which are in the description of the video. And from those links, they can find your course, right?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah. I gave you a link for my website in general, and then there's a tab for the store that'll bring you to the course, Home for the Holidays. Shouldn't be a war zone. How to keep the conversation civil.
Well, and it is also interesting. My brother and I one time had this conversation, actually, of like one time he said, like, what happened to you? You're not following the party line. I mean, and he actually said it that way, which meant I was doing something differently than my family code or something. And I'm like, okay, we come back here from our different places across the globe. We come to our home of origin. For a long time, we went back to the home where we grew up, which is full of emotional, like from my point of view, the work that I do, this is like walking into your emotional history. Mm-hmm. It's like it lives in the furniture, it lives in the rooms, it lives in your memories of the things you did. Like the kitchen table was really important in my memory of my family. Maybe not the other people in my family either, but it's to me. And so, but I said to him, but listen, we lived here together for 16 years of your life, because like you were born after me. So we weren't even here 18 years together. Then I went to college. Then you went to college. Then we went here. Then we went there. I said, we've spent, by this time, like we were probably close to 50, like I said, we spent like 30 years apart, away from this family dynamic. And so he was like, I hate it when you talk like this. And then we laughed, because when I just kind of framed it slightly larger than the fact that I wasn't doing something that he expected me to do, that he had expected me to do when he was 16, then he realized, like, oh, wait, like, it was like fast forward, and it's like, okay, we aren't back there in time. But that's part of the stress of the holidays, is going back to your family of origin or your extended family of origin, and what was your place in the family? How do you fit into the family now? Not as that person you were when you were born into that family. It's like, I think it's wonderful. I mean, I think this provides all kinds of opportunities for growth and conversation and change. You know, and a lot of my family would just like to play a game.
Well, this is a different kind of game, right?
Yes. I want to play the history game. But then again, a sense of humor. It's like, when you and I talk, we laugh. We're talking about really serious stuff,
Right.
but with a light touch. And that's also tricky because somebody can feel laughed at when maybe I'm laughing because I had a whole picture come together out of like a jigsaw puzzle. Like all the parts were floating and somebody said something and it all comes together and I start to laugh and they think I'm laughing at them. When in reality I'm laughing from joy, and it was their comment that brought the picture into focus.
Yep. And there's laughter with, out of nervousness. There is laughter out of, I just need a release. I don't even know if it's joy or nervousness. There are different things, and we need to, and that's just information, right? That's just the fact that you laughed is just raw information. We don't actually know what that means until we ask. Now, the challenge that we run into and where a lot of conflicts are being created is that if we don't ask, there's a gap. And that gap is filled in by none other than our assumptions. And they are happening so fast, we're not even aware that it's an assumption. To us, it's a matter of fact that you laughed at me.
Right.
But is it really true? And I think that in most cases, it's not. And it's just a matter of having a conversation. The same way that we would ask a question if we want to solve a problem. And that's really what we're doing when it comes down to the conversation of I'm only a communication consultant. That's really my big finish.
I think you did. I was just thinking, God, we could probably talk about this for hours.
Oh, I can totally riff on this. Conflict and crisis are so fascinating to me because of the fact that they are an opportunity to heal not only what's happening in that moment, but so many things that have already happened before, because we learn to bring those forward and use what we've gained and apply it in the case of conflict or crisis. And that, I think, is a big piece. We're not taught how to communicate, so we're really not taught how to deal with conflict. When we don't know how to deal with a crisis, to us, conflict and crisis are bad. But I've shown that they can actually be something that can move us forward. And that's how we heal throughout the conflict and crisis, is by looking at it and saying, okay, how do I change my perspective and what can I gain? How can I work through this in a way that I'm not looking back and saying, for right now in the pandemic, we have so many people that are saying, I just want to get back to normal. Well, but then you have to heal from this. What happens if instead of saying, I want to get back to normal, a normal that you weren't happy with to begin with?
Right.
What happens if instead you say, okay, this is just a circumstance. Let's take a look. I'm in a new position now. I have a new opportunity to do something differently and be able to move forward through this, so that instead of going back to where I was or trying to get back to something I didn't like, I'm saying, no, I want to go there. That would be silly. I want to go there. And I start looking at what next step I can take. That is healing through conflict and crisis.
That's really great. And this, you're going to laugh. It goes back to one of the first guests on here. She talked about that a path is made by walking. You just take one step and you look around. And then you know which is the next step to take.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this has been really, really helpful, Joyce. And I'm so glad that you could come and talk. And I'll remind people that the links to connect with Joyce are in the description, and this will be in the Healing Path group. And if you have questions, please type them in there, and we will be happy to answer or share. If you have thoughts, if you have ideas, just start typing and see what happens. A conversation is made by typing. So thank you very much,
Thank you.
and perhaps after Christmas we will think about. I'm sort of thinking about bringing everybody back again for part 2, because there's so much in every topic,
Mhm.
so much to be learned and explored. So
Absolutely.
thank you so much.
Thank you.